So we're now moving on to our second of the three Islamic empires we're going to be looking at, the Safavids. As I mentioned previously, when you think Safavids, think Iran. And today, among many Iranians, people, ethnic Persians, this is looked back to as a time of great glory that they're very proud of. But this is kind of what you want to think of. So the Safavid Empire is very complex. And again, remember, one of our major themes in this class is understanding how Islamic empires are different. How they, even though they're all Islamic, right? Islam is the most dominant religion. They all do things a little bit differently. So, one thing we have to note first of all is that Persia had been conquered by the Mongols. Right? The Persians, modern day Iranians, had been conquered by the Mongols. Eventually, the Mongols will fall, and they will be replaced by a Turkish group. Right? This Turkish group is going to rise up and take power. So people who are ethnically similar to the Ottomans will take power. This creates a problem because you have the Turks, an ethnic minority, ruling these Persians who are the ethnic majority. So there's nothing stopping the Persians from saying, you know what? We have our own language. We have our own culture. We have our own history that's different from these Turks. And in fact, these Turks are relative newcomers. We go all the way back to Cyrus the Great, someone who existed several hundred years before the birth of Jesus, someone who's very ancient. So why should we be ruled by these Turks, these people who have a different language than us, a different culture than us? Why should they be in charge? Shouldn't Persians be in charge of Persians? So that is a problem from the point of view of the Turks, this ethnic minority that are in charge. Now here's the thing though. Those Turkish rulers trace their ancestry to Muhammad. Right? Those Turkish rulers trace their ancestry to Muhammad, which means that they could declare themselves caliph if they wanted to. So they embraced Shia Islam. Right? They're going to embrace Shia Islam. So the idea here is that they can use religious unity to overcome ethnic disunity. They may say, sure, we're Turks and you're Persians, but we're all Shia Muslims. And since we're descendants of Muhammad, it's really important for you to listen to us, right? Because that's what Shia Muslims do. We respect the authority of people descended from Muhammad. So, it's really hard to change your ethnicity, right? You can't just suddenly decide, well, I'm Chinese, I'm going to become French, right? In that sense, it's kind of, it's hard for us to do that, but it's comparatively easy to change someone's religion, right? They just have to, go through the process of converting to a different religion. So basically to kind of, I know this is confusing, but to restate, this Turkish ethnic minority is ruling a Persian ethnic majority, and so there's always a threat that they could be overthrown, right? Especially they're the minority, it's relatively easy to do that. But because they trace their ancestry back to Muhammad, they are able to embrace Shia Islam, which has that the descendants of Muhammad have a special authority, and they can try and use this to build a religious unity, right? Doesn't matter that we're different ethnic groups. We're all Shia Muslims here. We all follow a leader who is descended from Muhammad. Now, of course, the issue was there were some people who would say, wait a second, I'm not a Shia Muslim. And they were told that you have to convert. Now, what's striking is they didn't just force Christians to convert to Shia Islam. They also forced non-Shia Muslims to convert to Shia Islam. So they forced Sunni Muslims to convert to Shia Islam. Now, this is a big no-no in traditional Islamic thought, right? Remember we talked about earlier, you're supposed to give people the book the option of paying a tax. This option was not given to the Christians. They were forced to convert to Shia Islam. And you're definitely not supposed to force other Muslims to convert. In general, in Islamic theology, if you say you're a Muslim, you're a Muslim. Now, that's been challenged by some Muslims over in recent years, but for the most part, that has been traditionally what's held true. If you say you're a Muslim, you're a Muslim. So forcing Muslims to convert to another form of Islam was not something that was typically done. But you can see here, this group of people were being, the Turks ruling the Safavid Empire were becoming increasingly intolerant, more intolerant than Islam is supposed to be according to traditional religious orthodoxy, in order to unify the government, in order to unify the society, in order to unify their empire. Now, this did work to a large degree, and Iran to this day is a kind of powerhouse of Shia Islam, right? And a lot of it has to do with tracing its roots back here, and that's one reason why Iran and Saudi Arabia, which is kind of the citadel of Sunni Islam, why they don't always get along. But of course, this will mean that the Safavid Empire will often fight with the Ottomans, who understand themselves as Sunni Muslims and claim to have the caliphate. Right? You have kind of rival claims to who's caliph, right? The Ottomans versus the Safavids, right? The Ottomans claim they're the caliphate because, they conquered Byzantium and so forth. Whereas from the Safavid Empire's point of view, they're not the real caliphs because they're not descended from Muhammad. Now, this is going to allow unification, but it is going to be hard to expand because the Ottoman Empire is very powerful in the west of the Safavid Empire, and to the east is the Mughal Empire, which we're going to look at later. So the Safavid Empire is kind of boxed in. It can't really expand, and this creates a feeling of being under siege, a feeling that they are under attack by an outside world hostile to them. And it's striking how much that's how Iran and Iranians often feel today, that they're surrounded by a hostile world that wants to destroy them. And that actually governs a lot of the foreign policy postures that that the Iranian government takes today. So you can kind of trace this line back. So here we see the Safavid Empire, because of the unique circumstances they faced of this Turkish minority ruling a Persian majority, how they followed a different kind of religious policy. Now, I don't want to end simply on something like that kind of dry political stuff. I do want to point out that the Safavid Empire also created this beautiful capital called Isfahan. And you can kind of see it is a gorgeous place. And this is a very impressive, I think, domed mosque you can see here. But I wanted to kind of highlight one achievement of the Safavid Empire is building this architecturally beautiful structure.